I'm Lee Bunnell. I'm a forester, retired from the Forest Service and from working for other foresters and under my own license. I was born in the Hollywood Hospital in the Los Angeles area, and I started elementary school in Venice, and then in Culver City, and then I went to John Muir Junior High School in Los Angeles. When I was in the junior high school, I spent a lot of time backpacking with the Boy Scouts and with my family, camping with my family. When I came up to do an 8th grade paper, I showed a decision to go into forestry, 1947. Actually I continued that as an objective all the way into college. The paper was just about the trip that I'd taken to Yosemite. Well, it showed that I'd made that decision. I think being out in the mountains in Los Angeles, you could take a red car clear over to Pasadena and San Gabriel's, and then go by yourself or small groups. Well, it was wild country, and I backpacked a lot in the San Gabriel Canyon. They used to have lodges or way stations in the canyons where you could just pack in your sleeping bag and stay, just like the High Sierra camps. But there weren't many people out there.
Did you do scouting?
Yes.
And when you did scouting, was it one of those lifelong, all the way through to Eagle Scout? Was it?
I branched off into the Explorer Scouts and got my the top award as an Explorer Scout. Well, as I finished high school and then had to decide where to go, I considered John Muir Junior College. Pasadena City College, I guess it was. It had a 2-year program at the time, and my parents encouraged me to go to a 4-year school for forestry.
And how did you choose between the forestry schools?
Well, back in the 40s, when you don't have much money, there was only one option besides the 2-year programs.
And that would be?
The University of California.
And so you went to which university?
I went to UCLA for 2 years, and then to Forestry Summer Camp at Meadow Valley, and then finally to UC Berkeley. Well, the forestry class I was in was down to 25 students. For that period, that was a low number, and I had met everybody, or just about everybody, at summer camp. So I had lots of friends and actually fit in very well.
Do you know if there was a reason for the low forestry class numbers?
No, I think it was just the birth rate in the Depression. We did have veterans too, actually, that probably added to the enrollment. Well, there was John Zivnuska, Hank, Fox, Bob Cowell. gosh, it's been so long I can't remember. Ed Stone was a academic enemy of mine, but a reasonably good friend. And
Do you want to say what that means, an academic enemy? What do you mean by that?
well, I remember one time wanting to go down to a UCLA Cal game, and Ed wouldn't let me take an oral interview on that, or go without an oral interview. So I had to sit down with Ed and with a teaching assistant by the name of Stan Vale and take an oral interview. I got to go, but it was there's a little friction there.
Yes, it sounds like it.
When I went through the university, I took military science, and when I got my bachelor's degree, I was commissioned in the Army Reserve, and was married to Pat shortly afterwards, and then headed for Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and spent better than 3 months there.
And then what happened?
2 years in the service. When I graduated from Berkeley, I was awarded a commission in the Army Reserve by a friend of the family, an admiral from Treasure Island, so that made it a little more important. Went to work on the
Klamath.
On the Klamath National Forest, and then when I was called to active duty, I left to finish my military training on the East Coast. I think learning to organize and to manage people was a big thing. And we had a few projects, some down at Hunter Liggett Military Reservation, and then we built the target ranges, the train fire ranges at Fort Ord. But I was in engineer construction battalion. I went back to Berkeley and finished a master's degree there, and then went to work on the Klamath. Actually, I'd gone to work on the Klamath National Forest when I graduated in 1956. Okay, after I finished at the University of California, I went to work back on the Klamath and was assigned to the Happy Camp District. At that time, it was a low moisture year, and the woods were still open in December. We couldn't find a place to live in Happy Camp, so we ended up renting a old dredge housing cabin in Syed Valley. I spent that summer administering timber sales and scaling, basically timber-related work. In the fall of the year, I was sent downriver to a fire out of Orleans, the mine fire, which started at the highway at 400 feet in elevation, and ended up on above Soames Peak, which was over 5,000 feet then, and got to meet quite a few good firefighters when I did that. Came home after a week and said that Orleans was really a terrible place to be, and I'd never take a transfer there. Within a day or two, the forest supervisor called, and I had been transferred to Orleans. It was an interesting thing because I went down as a project sales officer, but I filled in for the TMO who had come down with hepatitis. And so I basically did his work for a year and then continued on the timber sale preparation side of things. We had a timber sale planned about 20 miles up Bluff Creek called the Notice Creek Sale, and camped in the spot where evidence of Bigfoot had recently been discovered. Well, we got to cover the sale area and do the sale preparation, and we were finished about the same time that the movie on Bigfoot began to be shown. I spent the rest of the time there at Orleans, and then moved to Klamath in charge of timber on the district. And Klamath is, well, it's at that time a combination of the Northern Redwood Purchase Unit, Redwoods, and the backcountry, which is in Goose Creek. The very different areas, but I spent 3 years working in the Redwoods. I developed a way of dealing with volume estimates on the timber sales, and modified variable plot cruising to work on redwoods. When I left the Redwood District, I moved into sale preparation, sale administration on the forest, and quite a change. I traveled a lot, usually 2 or 3 nights a week, and did cruiser training and truck cruising. But my big interest was in planning timber sales. And before I left the Six Rivers, I'd worked so much studying aerial photographs on the South Fork of the Smith River that I could actually see that in my dreams at night, like I was flying over it in a big bird. But I went back to Orleans as ranger, and spent 3 very good years there. We had left Orleans with no enemies, and we got a good reception when we went back. from the Orleans district, I went to replace the ranger at Fall River Mills, and at that time we were having problems with the Pit River Indian tribe, and that continued through my time at Fall River Mills, when we had a blockage of the a campground on Hat Creek, and then Christmas tree theft, all things that were involved with land ownership. And I was lucky enough to sit through at least one court case before I left and moved into Redding. Well, they figured it was their own land, and they weren't consulted about how it was managed, and they really wanted to do it themselves. I sat on several meetings, and I think that was clear.
Were you able to come to any resolution or agreement with them, or did?
No, we weren't at that time. I'm not sure how things are now. They had a confrontation in the year before I got to Fall River Mills, and tried to occupy the intersection of Highway 299 and it's 89 there. And ended up Forest Service forcibly removed the things they had there at the intersection. Now that wasn't exactly repeated, but the other attempts did continue over the next 2 years. While at Fall River Mills, the location of the Pacific Crest Trail was being confirmed, and we spent a number of days marking the last portion of the trail between Lassen Park and the end of the district boundary, crossing above Burney Falls, and dealing with both the state parks that had ownership where the trail was going, and the Pacific Crest Trail Association. It's good to see how the trail has developed and how the use has increased on it. In coming to Redding, I thought I would be dealing with a timber program that was quite large, but all of a sudden the outcomes of the Wilderness Act, the National Environmental Protection Act, and protests on much of the logging that was being done cut the program down considerably. But we continued actually to sell timber up until the time I retired. Where the Haystack Fire was is west of Wairika. It burned right down to the edge of the town of Wairika. It burned across the Klamath River. It burned up Beaver Creek almost to the Oregon border and to some of the high country to the south of there. But it was a big fire.
Steep ground?
Steep ground, very. It was a large timber fire, and it burned a lot of forested areas, ranging from large old growth to small poles. And we had a number of foresters working on that, on the salvage. The road situation was a little tricky because quite a bit of it was in unsurveyed areas, and we had to get with the private companies that owned checkerboard ownership and things in the fire, and agree on a aerial photo subdivision so that we could actually get the timber out in a reasonable time. My initial time with the Klamath was working on the salvage of the Haystack Fire. And I started out at the Oak Knoll Ranger Station, learned to scale and do administration work on timber sales, and then spent time on fires as needed because we were still having problems. They had to use cable logging on a portion of it.
And was cable logging pretty sophisticated by that time, or was this sort of relatively new?
It was new to California.
And did the loggers, were they enthusiastic about this system of logging, or were they resistant?
Well, you had people that knew how to do it, and you had people that learned how to do it. And I heard some grumbling about not using tractors, but using the cable equipment. And again, it was steep ground, and we lost logs occasionally, but I don't think there was any revolt. The approach to going on a fire has changed significantly compared to the 1950s. One of my first assignments was to fly with a fire control officer in a helicopter down to Woolly Creek on the in the Marble Mountains wilderness, and we took our fire tools, got out on the struts of the helicopter, and jumped. Now that didn't last very long. They changed that to the padded suits, and the other thing is that we can't leave anything to the night shift anymore. That was an old saying. When you had a piece of tough line or you had something you couldn't accomplish in the daytime, you leave it for the night shift. They don't do that anymore. We were prepared for the 1964 flood by packing our car with presents to go down to Los Angeles, and had friends in to talk about the trip. And one of our engineering friends said that the only way to get out of Humboldt County at that point in time was to fly. All the roads were closed, east, south, and north, and we were very fortunate not to be living along the river at that time, but we delayed, and there was a tremendous effort to get roads open, to repair damage. I went in with a small group of men. We were helicoptered up to the head of Bluff Creek, and Bluff Creek had actually been opened up by road construction right above the Klamath River some years before. And when the 64 flood hit, it took out, changed the channel of Bluff Creek and put the creek going right straight into the Klamath River. And we walked down the creek from Lonesome Ridge, which is about 26 miles up to the north, and saw almost no culverts left in the roads. It was cleaned out. Actually, the Smith River, the North Fork of the Smith River, was the only one that was running anywhere near clear at that time. But there was a tremendous amount of work left to do to open up the road, and but the bridge was out at Klamath, so you had to take a ferry to cross the Klamath River, and the loggers opened up the highway at Willow Creek so you could get onto Highway 96 and at least get up towards Orleans at that time. But damage was every place, and it was a challenge, first for the roads and then for the timber sales, and to try to keep some of the mills going. The 1955 flood had taken out all the old dredges, the big buildings, and so there weren't any of the dredges to come down the river. But I know that it opened up the country significantly. We lost so much access. The Redwood District was unique in California Ranger districts. Much of the redwood came from the Northern Redwood Purchase Unit, which was designed to establish government ownership of of the redwoods. There was a northern redwood purchase unit and a southern redwood purchase unit. The northern had the most area in it. The redwood purchase unit was also contained the redwood experimental forest, and the Forest Service ran that to attempt to determine what the best way to cut old growth redwood was and get reproduction. But it lasted until recently. Enjoyable working in the redwoods. The size of the trees, basically the challenges for logging. Well, we began planting trees before I got there, but to watch the successful slash reduction, usually by burning, and the planting was a great satisfaction. I also was involved in the early small tree harvest program. We had several power plants established, and they provided a market for chips. Actually, the improved utilization over the years with chip recovery and was a very satisfying thing. Well, I started in college and continued my membership up to the present. It's a bit discouraging because we used to hold meetings that were called Forest Forum meetings, and so you had more of the timber industry folks coming to the meetings and sharing ideas and things. And it was a good thing. I remember one of the highlights of the chapter in Eureka was to have a program presented by Humboldt State College each year, and that worked out very well. But it was discouraging that almost each time I moved, there seemed to be fewer people coming to the meetings, and you had more organizations. You had organizations of certified foresters, of forest landowners, and the industry associations, and so we've ended up with fewer people attending the meetings and being active. Right now, most of our chapters seem to be struggling to have enough members to hold an election. Well, I think the Forest Service employees and the SAF were involved in different programs. We had a site on at Bluff Creek on the Six Rivers that they had started using for that type of thing, and the need camp here in Reading, and then they specialized teacher training for grades K through 12, I guess, where they would teachers were trained for a period of time in appropriate settings. Well, I didn't attend the teacher training, but I did spend quite a bit of time at the need camp as it started up. And
what did you do when you were there?
we talked about forestry, took the kids out on walks, and there were a lot of contributions. The retired Forest Service employees that were knowledgeable about mining taught classes, but the SAF did provide programs in the Reading area. Well, I think it's important for forestry to have more exposure, and we do have the logging conferences, and they're open to the children. Turtle Bay was set up originally. The Paul Bunyan exhibits there for environmental education, and the Society of they had a large trailer that they hauled to different locations that had a prepared program in it. These are all good things. Well, moving into the conflicts on the land claims was worthwhile to do. I think my position may have been a little inappropriate at the time, but I think the first conflict I remember was dust on the roads coming off of the Haystack Burn and Beaver Creek, and people would actually roll rocks in the roads to slow down the logging trucks. But that was solved by adequate dust control. That if you want to do it, go ahead and do it. I would recommend the effort. I think these are probably good days to start in something like that, and it is very satisfying. When I was at Orleans, the GO Road was being developed. GO Road for the Gasky Orleans area, and it would have, if completed, tied a road of a sufficient standard to haul logs all the way from Orleans to the South Fork of the Smith River and the existing roads there. And the road was built up from the south into Elk Valley and up from the South Fork to almost the area of Dr. Rock. And now it's in the wilderness area, so it's untouchable. I mentioned certifications, including registrations, and I think My first contact was with the Civicultural Certification Program, and as an observer, I thought that that program really was beneficial to the Forest Service and the public. And the next was the Sale Administration Program. And again, that we had strong people that prepared the programs. Our employees were tested and involved in it, and I think it was a big benefit to the Forest Service. But we had some of the old programs too, the scaling program and scaling certification, and all of those things helped, though our scaling program largely went over to third-party scaling as the years went on.